Yeah.
So yeah, so one last comment on that. I know you don't want to talk about the data stuff, but
What do you mean?
yeah, I think there is a conversation to
Oh, that okay. No,
happen.
I don't mind talking about that. I just wanted to
Yeah,
separate it for that discussion because at the end of the day, then you just get someone going, but the data, and now we can't talk about shit. So that was the only reason I wanted to separate it for that part. But yeah, go ahead.
yeah. I mean, I think that there's been several articles that have came out that said that, the Chinese government is deeply involved with a lot of the data collection through ByteDance, the parent corporation. And you kind of have to play by the rules when you're Chinese tech company. It's not like in the United States where we just like, yeah, whatever, just like go run off and do whatever you want, and once in a while we'll slap you on the wrist with a few $1 billion fine, but otherwise do whatever the hell you want. So there is a concern here for the data collection, because if you know that your data is being sent essentially to the Chinese government to some degree,
Yeah,
that is a pretty big concern.
it's a big concern.
And like as we're moving more and more towards technology being able to have your biometrics and all this other things, and unlike China, they actually do have a social credit system. So it wouldn't be incredibly far-fetched, although sometimes I hit a little bit of like my hypotheticals here. It wouldn't be too far-fetched to assume that there would be some type of social credit score built on you as a Westerner before you even go to China. So,
Can I
one
hit you
final
with a deep question about that real quick? Do we not
yeah, go
already
ahead.
technically have a social credit system? Is social media not the ultimate version of it for the U.S. right now?
I mean, I guess it's kind of like for private organizations.
Yeah.
Like if someone's like, "Can I hire this person?" and they go to their Twitter and they're just like crazy. Like that is some element of a social
Yeah.
credit system,
It's
right?
to the nth degree over there,
Um,
like dystopian esque. But so I get where there's a big gap I'm taking in that logic. But at the same
yeah,
time,
yeah, yeah.
we have a semi social credit system baked into everything we do already.
Well, you could even go as far back to say there's always been a social credit system. Like, if I'm getting a job, they're gonna like talk to their friends and be like, "Is this guy fucking crazy? Like, should I hire him? He's gonna burn my company to the ground." Like, that is gonna exist, right?
Yeah.
And that's gonna be through friends and networks and
The
stuff like
problem
that.
is the
It's just,
single entity getting the ginormous amount of data that
yeah,
we don't even know they're taking. That's the problem, is the unknown and the giant one single entity. Instead of our social media social credit is me kind of voluntarily putting my info out there. There's a little bit of a big difference.
yeah, yeah. I mean, to some degree. Yeah. So a small story I have about that is my father used to always go to China. He built hardware there, and he said he can't go back now. And the reason he can't go back is because he works with the government. He has something called a GSA contract, and basically his concern is if I show up in China now, are they gonna they know that I'm working with the government to some degree. Am I just gonna like disappear? Am I gonna be like imprisoned and be told like there? It's a little bit far-fetched,
Yeah,
okay, but
I'm following you.
there is some stories happening out of China where Westerners are showing up there and they basically put them in jail, but they don't like define what the charges are, and they're there for a while, and they just release them, and it's almost like a catch and release, like you better not fuck with us.
Oh,
Like,
you want an anecdotal story like that? I have a couple friends who they left college real early, 2008, bought into Bitcoin, became millionaires, and they are now running companies worldwide. They go over to China. First two times they got arrested, both times, no reason. True story. You
wow.
have to admit being guilty. Their lawyer was over there. He said, "Just admit you're guilty." They don't care.
Wow.
They just want to. They just want the guilty. They'll get some info on you and they'll let you go. And it's exactly what happened. They pleaded guilty. No problems. They were let go same day, but they had to go through that just for the
Wait, why did they have to plead guilty?
lawyer. Just
'Cause
said
would.
it's similar in Japan too. I have friends that live in Japan. If you, they will basically interrogate you until like you're almost better off admitting fault because the penalty is usually less and you're better likely to get off than if you were to fight it because they want close to 100% conviction rates. Little known fact.
Wow.
The conviction rate is very important over in Japan. It's very important over in China, anecdotally, to my knowledge, and a lot of times you're better off pleading guilty than getting interrogated forever, and they'll try to get you a little harder. I don't know how that
Right.
came up, but yeah.
Well, I mean, we're
Yeah.
you know, riffing and going all these directions, but you know, it's I mean, it could become a national security threat. Like, you know,
That was the whole thing with TikTok that came up. What was that, like 9 months ago? Which disappeared out of nowhere. To kind of get off this a little bit, I was a little confused when I first saw that news, just with ByteDance wanting to get into virtual reality, because in my mind, augmented reality would have been much better for TikTok. I think always that I don't really separate AR and VR. I think there's elements of both that will always be together. But do you think, if this is true that they're buying Pico, that they're just trying to get into the door of VR, but their goal is still probably AR overall? Because I don't see them being a headset manufacturer right away.
Yeah, so hardware is a little bit more nuanced. I spent a little bit of time working in hardware in the past. So there's OEMs and ODMs, and then there's like the actual manufacturing lines, right? The ODMs are basically, they design it, and then the OEMs actually manufacture it. So like, you can go to the ODM and say, hey, I want a, Dell version of this, and then basically work with an OEM to actually manufacture it. That's why a lot of these headsets are starting to look relatively similar. Is like you're basically working with a similar manufacturing line, or you're working with the original design manufacturer. So Pico, is Pico an ODM or OEM? I think that's one of the biggest questions, because if they're designing their hardware or they're just manufacturing, I don't actually know
the same
what
factory they do the Oculus Quest. It's the same factory, so I would
Okay,
assume
so
they're probably more OEM than ODM.
Yeah, so the biggest moat as a hardware company is just getting access to manufacturing lines and getting access to chips. So what a lot of people don't know is over 50% of all the advanced chips in the world are built by one company in Taiwan called TSMC, a Taiwanese semiconductor group. And so if you have access to the chips and you have access to the manufacturing line, it doesn't matter if someone comes out with a prototype. Who fucking cares? You can't manufacture it at scale. And that's one of the biggest issues that hardware startups have. They go, hey, I'm gonna like manufacture this, and I'm gonna like put this over here, patch, and I know exactly how it's gonna cost. And then they go into the rabbit hole of manufacturing, and they go, actually, this assembly, this manufacturing line is bought by Apple for the next 2 fucking years. Like Apple always gets preferential treatment in all these lines. They'll always have first access to the chips. They'll always have first access to the manufacturing lines. So I would assume the acquisition here is to give them that advantage, is the advantage of actually manufacturing it. Like, you can prototype all freaking day. It doesn't matter if you can't manufacture it at scale. And that if ByteDance is getting into consumer, they need to whip millions of these out. And the only way they're going to do that is to control manufacturing line. This is also why Snapchat made that acquisition. Snapchat made some recent hardware acquisition. Everybody goes, why the hell would that? It's because if they don't, some third party could come in there and basically take over the whole manufacturing line. Facebook could go in there and just be like, we want to buy all this. And then even if they have a prototype, even if it's the coolest thing in the world, they can't mass produce it for 2 freaking years. So they're going to lose anyway. And this is one of the like unknowns about like why hardware is so hard. It's so fucking hard, man. And it's more than just, hey, I can build this prototype. Hey, I can I can economically model out all these things. And it goes back to the conversation we had in the very beginning. Facebook's monopoly is a monopoly of so many different degrees that when you go, hey, why is HTC shitting the bed? Why is, all these other, hardware companies not competing? Because it's so much harder than just, hey, I'm making a headset and I'm gonna ship it to this person. It's so much logistics. It's so difficult to build a product at mass scale.
Yeah, that's a lot, man. It's hit that subscribe button to stay on top of the daily clips, or catch the debates and fireside chats live on the main channel down in the video description. See you next time, Space Cowboys.